about some of the things that are happening within our region to make this a more equitable place. And we actually get to hear from people who are impacted, who could benefit from a living wage. And we're going to hear from employers who are already doing a living wage. Here at One Hood, we're prioritizing this issue because we believe in building liberated communities, and we believe in funding artists and making sure people have what they need to live and thrive. We ourselves have adopted a ceiling minimum, which means we pay our contractors a minimum of $20 per hour because we want people to have a livable wage. And for that, we are doing this work because we understand that a lot of people who are living the paycheck to paycheck and who are impacted are those who are doing the work that keeps our region running. And we also know that far too often it's women, disabled people, people of color who are in the receiving end of these low, underpaid wages. And so whether we're talking tip workers who are working in our restaurants, or whether we're talking minimum wage workers, we all deserve to have a wage that allows us to have families, that allows us to pay our bills, that allows us to contribute back to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and explore the great things that this Commonwealth has to offer. And so as we know that people say that the rent is too high, the wages are too low, we want to talk about the ways in which we're able to make a change right here in Pennsylvania. So what is some of the legislation that is being proposed? What is going on in other places across the country? How are they addressing this living wage? And what does it even mean to have a living wage? Is it $15? Is it $21? What are we talking about? And so with that, we're going to have this PA Living Wage for All town hall. And we're going to talk about why we're launching this Living Wage for All campaign. So please make sure you're staying in tune, share this out with family and friends, and stay for the whole entire hour because we're going to have a call to action. Rumor is there's a new website that we're going to launch in a little bit. So please stay in tune. And with that, I'm going to send it over to the executive director from the Keystone Progress. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about why your organization is leading the way for a living wage for all here in Pennsylvania?
We sure can. Miracle, thank you for having us. For those of you who are familiar, I'm Executive Director of Keystone Progress Education Fund, which is our C3, and Keystone Progress, which is our C4. And we are in this fight very, very much for the same reasons that Miracle talked about, but it's just a fundamental right of every human being that they should be able to live on a single wage and have dignity in their work. And that requires that they be paid a living wage. And, when we started this work a long time ago, it was the fight for 15. And of course, it has gone on so long now that 15 now is not a livable wage anymore. And so we are now in Pennsylvania, living wage, currently is around $21 plus, depending on your household. And we believe, much like Miracle and One Hood, that we live by our principles, and we as well make sure that when we hire contractors and hire folks that their our floor is a living wage. And so you can't go do this work if you're not living your principles. And so we just really feel, again, that the fundamental human right and dignity of people who work and live, that they should be able to live off of, one wage, and which is why we're in this fight. And we understand also that beyond just the educational piece, that, in order to pass legislation that will actually impact people's lives, you must have people in your city halls, in your state legislatures, or wherever these decisions are made that support that. And so that is the work and the fight that we want to take forward, and making sure that everyone in Pennsylvania has the ability to live off of their work. So that's why we're here. And we want to thank One for Wage and One Hood and everybody who's here today for joining in this conversation. It is so important that we do this work now, and we can't wait anymore. So let's go.
Thank you so much for that, Laura. It's greatly appreciated. I think it's also important to know that there are people who are already doing this work. And talking about doing this work, the convener who has been working across the country to get living wages and to include sub-minimum wages is One Fair Wage. And so we want to welcome Executive Director Saru. Can you talk a little bit about what is a fair wage, what is sub-minimum workers, and why should they be included in a minimum wage bill?
Thank you so much, Miracle and Laura. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you to the Lieutenant Governor for joining us. And I see Malcolm Pinata. Thank you so much for being here as well. And for everybody who's listening in, I see we have about 50 people joining us today, which we really appreciate. Look, right now, all polling across the country is showing that the top issue for voters, for especially young people, but also people of color this cycle, is the rising cost of living and jobs with living wages by far. And I would love to share with all of you a link to a summary of polls we did with Lake Research Associates, Linda Lake pollster, showing that this year, top issue, especially for young voters, Latino voters, Black voters, rising cost of living, jobs with living wages above all other issues. And I want to explain a little bit about how did we get to this point where this is going to be such a determining factor for this year's election. First, I'm going to speak a little bit about the industry we've been organizing in. I represent One Fair Wage. We're a national organization of about 300,000 restaurant and service workers, including about 3,000 in Pennsylvania, and 1,000 restaurant owners who are supportive of our mission of raising wages and ending sub-minimum wages across the country. The restaurant industry has been one of the largest and fastest growing private sector employers in the U.S., but it's been one of the lowest paying for generations due to the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers, which is a direct legacy of slavery. Prior to emancipation, workers in the U.S. that worked in restaurants did not get tips, only wages. After emancipation, the restaurant industry basically sought to hire newly freed Black people, Black women in particular, not pay them, and force them to live on this new thing that had just come from Europe at the time, called tips, as a way of accessing free labor, whereas before they were actually paying mostly white men to work in restaurants. Post-emancipation, it was actually two industries that did this, the Pullman Train Company and the restaurant industry. Of course, Pullman car porters organized and won the first Black union in the United States under the leadership of A. Philip Randolph and won the right to one fair wage, a full minimum wage with tips on top. But in response to their organizing, the National Restaurant Association fought to maintain a sub-minimum wage for Black women in the restaurant industry and won that in 1938 as part of the New Deal. And we went from $0 for tipped workers in 1938 all the way up to $2.13 an hour at the federal level and the very shameful $2.83 in the great state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is now one of 43 states that persists with this legacy of slavery, with a sub-minimum wage for tipped workers that impacts a workforce that still to this day is overwhelmingly women, disproportionately women of color, highest rates of single moms of any industry, highest rates of sexual harassment, because workers have to put up with so much from customers to get those tips. Now, there are 7 states that got rid of this many decades ago. California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Minnesota, Montana, and Alaska require a full minimum wage with tips on top, and actually have much higher restaurant sales, job growth rates, industry rates, and tipping averages than Pennsylvania. And this year, post-pandemic, with so many workers reporting that tips have gone down, harassment has gone up, we've seen 1.2 million workers walk off the job in the restaurant industry. We've seen thousands of restaurants respond by raising wages to recruit staff. And as a result, we are winning. We just won a fair wage, full minimum wage with tips on top in Washington, D.C. We just won a fair wage, full minimum wage with tips on top in Chicago, Flagstaff, Arizona. And we are on the ballot in 4 states this year: Arizona, Michigan, Massachusetts, and your neighboring state of Ohio all have a $15 wage with tips on top on the ballot this November. It's also moving as legislation in New York, Connecticut, Maryland, and a bunch of other states. So there's tremendous momentum for change, and it is partly because post-pandemic, there has been such a push for wages to actually match the rising cost of living. And that is why polling is showing. There was a poll conducted by Tufts University of young voters across the country that showed that the federal minimum wage, raising wages, jobs with living wages are the top issues for young voters this election cycle, and the same for Latino voters. And look, that has to be true for Pennsylvania as well. If you look at the MIT living wage calculator, one person in a 2-adult, 2-child household anywhere in Pennsylvania, according to the MIT living wage calculator, needs a minimum of $42.03 just to cover the basic costs of housing, food, and transportation. This is not taking your children to Disneyland or being able to buy Christmas gifts. This is just being able to cover the basic costs of living in Pennsylvania. So wages of 7 or 9 or 12 and certainly $2.83 are all far below what workers actually need to survive. And that is why so many workers are saying, this is my top priority as a voter. I will determine who I vote for this November based on whether people really prioritize a living wage, a wage that is closer to the cost of living, and for all, not excluding tipped workers, workers with disabilities, and youth, all of whom will get a raise this November in your neighboring state of Pennsylvania, of Ohio. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's really important, right? Because we're talking about living wages and we're talking about the ability to live, right? So we just don't want people to say we want the ability to pay rent. When people pay rent, people to have food, want people to be able to travel. We have in the Commonwealth, we have the Steelers, we have the Eagles. We want people to be able to enjoy the things that are here. And we don't want people to have to be in survival mode all the time. And that's what comes with having a living wage. And one of the people we want to talk to is, Diamond West. She is an organizer here, in Pittsburgh, a community activist, but also a mom of 2 young ones and someone who's had to survive on a minimum wage. And we're going to turn it over to Diamond and talk to her experience and why it's very important for us to have a living wage here in Pennsylvania.
Yes, thank you, Miracle. So as a 24-year-old, I have recently worked at like McDonald's for since I was 17. I would work there for 2 years. And then the last time I worked fast food, I worked and we only were getting paid about $13.75, and I was a manager. I was a manager, and the work was completely exhausting. Like it was like the work would be nonstop, and it was just really overwhelming. I would have to do 3 people's job at once, plenty of times, and not even being a manager in that experience field really, just being a 17-year-old working, doing the fries, doing the drive-through, collecting money, taking orders, all at the same time. So definitely I'm advocating for, a higher raise for these, for these workers, because it's really hard and exhausting work and they deserve to be compensated more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Diamond. And another worker, I want to turn it over to you, Kendra. You've been, fighting not only for living wages, but directly with tipped workers. Can you just talk a little bit why it's very important for you and your colleagues to have a living wage?
Sorry, I'm currently at work on my break. Yeah, I have been working as a tipped worker on and off since I was 13. I worked at a bingo hall serving under the table at 13. And from what I have gathered, like when you're living on tips, you are never going to leave survival mode because you do not know how much money is coming in day to day. Um, it's yeah, it just keeps you like just completely unsure of where you're at, and like your when your paycheck is dependent on the weather, how people are feeling that day. Um, you know, a menu switch up can cause like a loss of people. Um, yeah, nothing has really like, and we just saw with COVID that your job is the first to go if something happens. Um, in as far as like the pandemic was concerned, we saw so many people struggling just to get like food um and everything. The amount of like phone calls that I fielded while I was at Pittsburgh Restaurant Workers Aid, just struggling to survive. And I think that it's one of the more precarious industries right now. I don't like one thing, like one more pandemic, and you could wipe out an entire industry. Um, and I have noticed that most of my coworkers are women, especially women with kids doing that kind of job. Like, you know, just having kids in general is a lot. And then, you don't know if you're going to be able to pay rent, which is increasing. I'm 37 years old and I had to move back in with my parents, like, because rent is too high, food is too high, and I'm making $17 an hour. Like, we need more people to be fighting for this because a lot of people are struggling. Um, like I was at a job for $28 an hour, and that was the first time in my life that I felt safe, that I felt I could do it. But because of the pandemic, I was, 3 months back rent, and that's all it took for me to struggle for the rest of the year. So yeah, I think we deserve it. I don't think anybody understands the amount of emotional labor that it takes to do this job, let alone the physical labor. Um, and it deserves to be compensated. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kendra. I think what you're hearing from our workers is that there is a lot that goes into having a living wage, and there is a lot that we benefit when we do have a living wage. And I appreciate people putting stuff in the chat. If you have questions for our panelists or for our elected officials, please make sure you drop your question in the Q&A, and that will be read later on. And one of the things we talk about living wages, we always sometimes hear that, what about the business owner? Sometimes business owners, they'll go under if they have to pay people a living wage. And we're going to turn it over to Thomas from Boom Concepts. They are an organization based out here in Pittsburgh, an arts organization. And for years, they have paid artists living wages, and they are celebrating anniversary after anniversary. And so, Thomas, I want to turn it over to you. Just talk a little bit about why, on the business side of things, it's important that you're paying your employees and your contractors living wages.
Hello, yes, I'm Jay Thomas Agnew, co-founder of Boom Concepts here in Pittsburgh, also operation manager of Boom Concepts. Even I like to really think about, even before Boom Concepts had came, myself and my partner are both artists. We have done this work all of our lives, really, and thinking about how what we have done to have sustainable income, we've had to think about all types of different income streams, right, to survive. And, one of the people that spoke earlier, thinking about survival mode, right, that just puts you at such a disadvantage, as how you're able to live, how you're able to think, how you're able to process things in your life, and how you're able to move forward. And so when we started Boom Concepts, we were always thinking about things that were important to the community and things that we wanted for ourselves. And sustainable income was always one of those things. We had to do a lot of hard work for our first 3 years of our business to make sure that we were paying our staff equally. The individuals who worked on the team, we all made sure that everybody got paid, no matter how small it was, no matter what it took for everyone to make sure that they got some type of income, got some type of pay. And as we grew as organizations, our income and our payouts grew, right? When I think about the arts, right, we think about how a lot of times in art, you're paying for the product. That doesn't matter if you work in a museum or if you do commission work, right? It's always thinking about the product is first, the supplies are first, the resources are first, and the people come last, right? And you got to make sure, and it's the people who are doing all of these things. It's the people who are making sure the resources are available. It's the people who are creating the products that we go see, that we interact with, that we touch, that we, go visit and see in different places, right? It's the people who are curators who do all of this work, and they deserve to be paid. And I like to think about even over COVID, right? And I remember a large group was talking about getting back to the arts, but it was a great time to be able to talk with a lot of arts owners, a lot of arts organizers to raise that pay, to make sure that people were being taken care of. Like, yes, the arts is important. We want to come back to the arts and we want to be able to have people come to museums and different exhibition spaces or, come back to our programs. But those things don't move without the people. People have to have childcare. People have to make sure that they have a place to stay. I myself had to deal with early on, home displacement. I had to stay with friends. I had to do different things because I did not have enough money to pay for a space on my own. I did not have enough money to take care of, my bills, or just regular stuff, transportation. And so when we think about how we pay people, we have to think about all of those things that people need to even just get to work. The work is going to happen. People always make sure and take care of the work. I think everybody, I think the thought is that the higher that you pay people, the less work happens. People are going to go work regardless because they got families and they got themselves to take care of. And so, and I also like to think back, we were the launch space for the Fight for 15 here in Pittsburgh. Back in, I believe that might have been 2015, 2016, around that time. So, we have been highly supportive of making sure that people are getting sustainable income and also being able to think about opportunities to look at different income streams to make sure that they are being paid. We have a tool called Wage that is a nationally recognized tool that we go by when it comes to any of the job pieces that we have to make sure that everybody is getting paid what they deserve. And we also make sure that they know of this tool so that when they go to work with somebody else in the arts or they're doing something in the grants or they're doing anything else, right, they're thinking of themselves. I like to even think about grants, right? Again, you're thinking about the product, the program, the project, all of these things, the resources to get this thing done. And a lot of times they leave no room for people to get paid, right? That's so important. Like those projects, none of that happens without the person getting paid. So we have to respect that. We have to respect the people. We have to make sure that people are getting paid to be able to do the things out here that's going to keep this economy going forward. Without the people, yeah, we're nowhere. So, I like to think of, just making sure that we raise the income to where they're supposed to be. There are people who are doing more with less, and they shouldn't have to. There's more people that are working 2-3 jobs that shouldn't have to. There should be more opportunities for people to be able to live the way that they want to live and not based off of what somebody wants to give you or that's only fair to their business and what their business makes. I want everybody to prosper. So I'll make sure that I'm gonna pay the people I need to pay, that come and connect with Boom Concepts all day. So, definitely I thank everybody for taking their time out, sharing their stories. And, I hope what I say, helps in a great way. And again, we're gonna continue paying the people what they deserve.
Thank you so much for that, J. Thomas Agnew, because people need to be paid what they deserve. And Boom Concepts is a leader within this region about paying people a living wage and not only paying people, but advocating for other agencies to do the same. So I want to thank so much J. Thomas Agnew. I want to thank Kendra, and I want to thank Diamond so much for talking with us about the lived realities of working and being a business owner when it comes to livable wages. And one of these things that can change that here in Pennsylvania is our legislature. And so we're going to hear from a couple elected officials about the things that they are doing to make this reality. We want to first welcome Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis to talk a little bit about what is going on in Pennsylvania and what you can do to make living wages a reality for all of us. With that, welcome, Lieutenant Governor.
Well, first, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you all today. It's great to be joined with some champions in the legislature like my friends, Representative Malcolm Kenyatta and Representative Chris Rabb. Thank you for their tireless efforts to raise the minimum wage here in Pennsylvania, and it's great to be here with them. I want to thank all the grassroots organizers who have kept this issue at the forefront of the fight here in Pennsylvania and in our General Assembly. I grew up in McKeesport, which is a small working class town in southwestern Pennsylvania, and I come from a working class family. I'm the proud son of a union bus driver and a hairdresser and a first generation college graduate. But I know that's not the path for everyone. And let's not be naive. There are plenty of college grads who work in the restaurant industry today. It doesn't matter whether you're serving drinks or serving at the public as lieutenant governor. All work has value. There is dignity in a hard day's work, whether you're bussing tables or driving a bus. Pennsylvania workers don't want handouts. The governor and I, quite frankly, don't want to give them. We want to give workers a hand up and create an opportunity economy that gives everyone the shot to succeed and to live the American dream here in Pennsylvania. We want all Pennsylvania workers to have the opportunity to earn a fair wage. That's why the governor called for a substantial increase in the state's minimum wage, including for tip workers in his budget address earlier this month here at the state capitol. This is an issue that's a top priority for our administration. We're proud that along with Representative Kenyatta and Representative Rabb's help, the State House has taken action and passed legislation. However, it's important to note that we're the only state in the nation with a divided legislature. Nothing gets done without buy-in from both sides here in Pennsylvania. That said, we've been encouraged. There are those on the other side of the aisle in the Senate who have at least shown a willingness to engage in this very important issue. Our administration is going to keep talking and negotiating with folks in the House and Senate to get a deal on the state budget and on this important issue of raising the minimum wage here in Pennsylvania. What we need from grassroots organizers and activists on the ground is to keep making noise, keep pushing for a vision of the future that inspires Pennsylvanians, keep pushing for a vision where workers have enough to provide for their families, where there's enough affordable housing for every Pennsylvanian, where healthcare is accessible for every Pennsylvanian, and where our kids can walk to school and young people can live their lives free from the threat and the fear of gun violence that's plaguing many of our communities. That's what, quite frankly, I want for my daughter, Harper, and that's what I want for my hometown of McKeesport, and that's what I want for communities all across Pennsylvania. And that's what I want for every worker here in Pennsylvania. So I want to thank you all for having me today. Thank you for your advocacy. Now let's continue to work until we raise the minimum wage here in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Davis. And as he mentioned, we do have some people from the Pennsylvania legislature here to talk about the work that they have been doing in championing. I'm first going to come to Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, who seems to always be in a car whenever
I know.
we're trying.
I know, you know, that is the, yeah, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Miracle. You know, it's because we have a big state, so we're always somewhere. But I want to thank our Lieutenant Governor for his leadership and my good friend, as well my other good friend, Representative Rabb. But I really want to give a special shout out to Diamond and to Kendra and Jay Thomas for sharing your stories and for humanizing this issue that I think sometimes we can get just bogged down in the numbers of it. You know, I grew up in a working poor family here in North Philly. My dad was a social worker. My mom was a home health aide. And particularly when folks have been talking about the restaurant industry, that always has a special place in my heart. My first job was washing dishes under the table at a little vegan soul food restaurant, if you can believe it or not. And all throughout college and after college, I worked at a restaurant, from that first gig to being a host to being a bartender, to eventually being a manager at a restaurant, and having to figure out how to survive on tips. And Kendra's point is so well taken, about how weather and menu selections and people's individual moods can impact your wages, but your bills are not impacted in the same way. But whatever your rent is, that is what your rent is. Whatever your utilities are, those what those costs are. And so the clear economic imbalance that this creates has a real impact on our community. But in addition to fighting to increase the wage to an actual living wage, we need to also make sure we're thinking about the auxiliary impacts of raising wages. Let me give you an example. After folks on Social Security saw an increase because of the rise in inflation and they got that inflationary bump, you say, yay, that's great. But we think about some of the programs that seniors depend on, like the rent and mortgage rebate program. And there were so many seniors who, because of that increase, ended up $100, $200 above the income threshold to qualify for that critical program. And so as we talk about raising the wage, we also have to have a conversation about the benefits cliff. And if folks are not familiar with that language, or familiar with that concept, I really would encourage you to get more in tune with this. And it's something that I've been thinking about. And very soon, myself, Representative Morgan Sevis, and Representative Ronnie Green, who used to work with SEIU. When the Fight for 15 started, she was one of the original organizers in that work years and years and years ago. And we've been having that conversation about how do we make sure that, along with raising wages, that we don't put people in this no-win situation where their wages go up by a couple of dollars, but they lose access to important tax credits, or lose access to important supplements to their housing or to their health care that make it impossible for them to balance. And we saw that particularly after the pandemic, where because of stagnant wages and the high cost of childcare, for example, you have a lot of families who are making a decision, does it even make sense for me to go into the workforce, or does one person stay home, or do we lean on a mom or an aunt or somebody else in the family to take on this extra labor and not really be able to compensate them because of these other additional costs? And so we're going to be introducing legislation to do a comprehensive study to understand how we need to also shift the income levels for some of these critical social safety net programs, along with rising wages. We must do both. At the end of the day, we have a responsibility as government to focus on, in my opinion, the least, the lost, and the last. And when we think about the fact that our wages have stubbornly remained at $7.25, I don't call it the minimum wage anymore. That is a starvation level wage. It is a wage that has no dignity, that is in line with the dignity of the work that people do every single day. I'm going to continue to fight like hell, because I understand in my bones what happens when we pay people what they deserve, or when we don't pay people what they deserve, and all the auxiliary impacts that comes from that. But we have to make sure we do this in a way that doesn't set people back as we try to solve some of these persistent challenges of a stagnant wage. And so I wanted to lift that up, and thank you, Miracle, for your incredible moderation and for making sure you prioritize and center this. We cannot stop. I think the statistics on this are real. The passion that we're seeing in our community is real. And we have to move in the legislature at the speed of the need. And we have not moved at the speed of the need. I mean, no offense to West Virginia, no offense to Ohio, but if Ohio and West Virginia can figure this out, I know that Pennsylvania has to be able to figure this out and put us in a position where our wages can be competitive with the states around us. We shouldn't have folks driving out of state to go get a job because they can make a little bit more than staying here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I look forward to continuing to be in this work with you, beside you, because that's the only way we're going to get it done. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. And when Representative Rabb gets here, we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on at the legislature. But I think it's very important for us to understand that there are so many things that are impacted by having a living wage and what does it mean. And I really appreciate Representative Kenyatta lifting up the fact that when these wages change, so do some of these social security nets. And to have that conversation is what you get when you have people who've been impacted, who are in these leadership positions and who are in community, asking them what their needs are. So the least and the last, we need somebody who is thinking about those issues and thinking about how these things are impacted, so we're able to have this, this region that is livable for all of us. And I'm very happy that people have been, using the chat. And so we're gonna get to the chat in just one moment. But before I do, I would be remiss to know, especially when we talk about the top of the hour, the cost of living is the number one issue on people's minds. Having enough money to eat, to know where you're going to sleep at night, to know if you're going to be able to have heat or water the next day. This is something that's on the top of people's minds. And this is an election year. So we want to make sure that people are able to stay involved and engaged about what's going on. And because of that, like I said earlier, we do have a website. It is called palivingwageforall.org. Again, palivingwageforall.org. Please make sure you go online to our website and sign up for updates and get involved. We're going to have more town halls, more conversations to talk about sub-minimum wage, tip workers, and elevating the wage across Pennsylvania to make sure we have what we need to live and thrive. And we're going to continue to uplift that voter data. And most importantly, we'll be letting you know about who supports raising wages and who does not, who believes in workers and who does not, and whether their 2024 platform includes livability for workers. And it's so very important that people are asking questions, who are engaged. And with that, I'm going to open up our Q&A. I see y'all are in the chat. And the first question comes from Richie. And I think this is for any of our elected officials to answer. But his question reads as follows. There has been attempts in the PA legislature to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. However, the living wage study, as other studies, indicates that $15 an hour is not a living wage in the country or the Commonwealth. What is being done in the State House to bring the minimum wage in line with actual cost of living? And we'll turn it over to anyone who would like to answer this question.
Looks like our elected officials may have left. So, I mean, we do know that the legislature has been looking at a $15 bill. And as the lieutenant governor said, the governor has been calling for it. And I think we as a coalition would like to make sure to put forward to any press on the that are listening in that we know that there is a Senate that still hasn't agreed to this, but that for those that are pushing to raise a minimum wage, we want to see a wage that is closer to the cost of living, and we want all workers to be included at 100% of the wage. So it was mentioned earlier by the lieutenant governor that, and by Rep. Kenyatta, that they know that tipped workers are important and that it's, that they're seeing the needs of tipped workers, but we want to be very clear that what we're calling for is 100% of the minimum wage for tipped workers, not 50 or 60 or 70% of the wage. What these workers need is a full minimum wage with tips on top. And to Rep. Kenyatta's point that we don't want to see workers leaving Pennsylvania, I can tell you with certainty that $15 an hour with tips on top is going to pass this November in Ohio. It's wildly popular and it's on the ballot. And so you will see Pennsylvania workers crossing the border to go work or live in Ohio if it's $2.83 in Pennsylvania, or even $5 or $6 or 50% of the wage, and you can get $15 an hour plus tips in Ohio. And so that is why, and already it's going up in Washington, D.C. And so that is why we're calling for not just 15, we are calling for a living wage for all, a wage that reflects the cost of living and includes tipped workers at 100% of the wage. I do see Rep. Brab has just joined, and maybe he can speak to this. Welcome, Rep. Brab. You're on mute, Miracle.
Not to put you on the spot, Representative Rab. I know you just got here. I know it's a very busy day. I really appreciate your time. We're talking about, affordable wages, and I want to give you some time to make some comments. But one of the questions was proposed is like, what's going on at the Pennsylvania legislature? There's a debate between $15 an hour, and $21 an hour, which the MIT study says we may need. Can you just talk a little bit about why we need living wages in Pennsylvania, but what is happening at the legislature for this specific measure?
Thank you so much. And I had some technical difficulties, so I'm glad I was able to tap in here. Look, the only reason we have passed a minimum wage increase bill to a lowly $15 an hour is because the Senate is controlled by right wingers who don't even probably believe we should have any minimum wage at all. So the idea, the strategy behind passing this watered down minimum wage bill is it was identical to a Republican senator's bill to increase the minimum wage. And so the theory was that, oh, we're just going to take the Republican bill because they can't say no to one of their own bills, and we'd pressure them to start there. But the problem is House Democrats' approach was based on logic, and that doesn't really fly in the Senate. So it didn't matter that we took a bill that was identical to a Republican's proposal. It was ignored. What we need to is to start strong with the strongest possible legislation. And I'm proud to be an author of that legislation, as inspired and partnered with One Fair Wage to make that happen. And so, I have a bill that would move the minimum wage up to $21 an hour, would abolish the tip minimum wage, would strengthen protections against wage theft, would index the minimum wage to cost of living, and would also end preemption so that municipalities, as is the case in other states like Illinois, could raise the minimum wage even higher than what the state minimum wage was. It also would expand the minimum wage to folks that were excluded, like gig workers, neurodivergent workers, and incarcerated workers. And the last piece is important too, because, that is a vestige of the imperfect ratification of the 13th Amendment. When we talk about ending slavery, it did not include prison labor. And so right now in Pennsylvania, the starting wage is 19 cents an hour. And the best job you can ever hope to have inside gets you $1.49 an hour. So there are bills that are robust. Granted, conservatives will not like them, but I think strategically, we need to put our best foot forward and ask for everything we want. And then if we have to negotiate, if we get to the negotiation tables, then that's what we should do. But if we start out weak, we've already lost. So I'm one of those folks who was not supportive of this strategy, even though I value the leadership of my colleagues, because there was a bill already vetted by Republicans that we thought could move. But the reality is they're not going to want to give up anything significant without asking for something in exchange. And that's a price that legislators have to pay in this game of horse trading. So that's the political context for what happened. But if we want to promote the things that you all are talking about, there's a bill that does that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Representative. And for educational purposes, can you let people know what is the name of their bill so they can, your bill, so people can go and research and read up on it more? Or if it's not, if it doesn't have a name, where they could find it?
Yeah, I mean, I call it the one fair wage bill, but in the legislature, we don't have named bills. And I've forgotten the bill number because it's been neglected for so long. I can't even tell you the number. But if it's easy enough to pop up, you can go to reprab.com, and you can find it there. But there are a number of better bills than the ones that House Democrats have been promoting. They're promoting it not because they don't want more, but because we realize that, Senate Republicans who control the Senate don't want anything. And we thought we could figure out the path of least resistance that has not proven successful. So if this bill dies in November and it's time to reintroduce another minimum wage bill, I hope it will be the one fair wage bill, because we need to we need to ask for everything. Otherwise, we're negotiating against ourselves, which is never a good strategic position to be in.
Thank you so much. And I'm gonna stay with you, Representative. I do. Another question from, I hope I said this right, Benasia Young said, how are supportive legislators keeping their not so supportive peers in check with sentiments around burger flippers make more than professors become a talking point to disparage conversations around living?
That is a great question. And ultimately, either you believe all work has dignity or you don't. So I find that type of language deeply disparaging and troublemaking. And this is an issue that transcends party affiliation. There's some Democrats with some raggedy politics, right? No one political party controls all the right values and such. And so we have work to do. We, like, just in our families, we got work to do. And there are members of the House Democratic Caucus who need to be better educated about this stuff. I have colleagues who still don't know what the tip minimum wage is. They don't know its origins. They don't know the facts around who it hurts and how it's evolved or devolved. They're not well aware of wage theft. They're not really familiar with preemption. There are any number of things that they need to have greater literacy on. So that's the responsibility of folks like me, but also their constituents, because they do listen to their constituents. So when you have an opportunity to talk to a lawmaker who said some problematic things, who say, oh, burger flippers get paid more than, listen, I was an adjunct professor getting paid a poverty wage. I helped expand that union by 1,500 and then got fired for it. So look, these talking points only help the excessively wealthy who are hoarding financial wealth at the expense of working families. So we're playing into their game when we're dividing and conquering, talking about who should be paid less, burger flippers or part-time professors and so forth. Now we've already lost if we're using those talking points. That is unacceptable, inappropriate, and carries the water of the billionaire class, because they are not creating the value. We create the value.
Thank you so much for that, Representative. And Thomas, since we're going to come back to you, because Justin had a question, and he said, how can workers and employers that want to do the right thing get involved in the work to raise the wages? I know, Thomas, you talked about how both concepts, y'all use the wage tool. So how have you been able as an employer to get involved? And then after, can we just I will hand it over to either you or Laura to talk about the ways that workers and employees can get involved in the fight. But first, turning it over to you, Thomas.
I think it's important to utilize advocacy and research and, showing how to raise wage, and also just really thinking, when we talk to other small arts organizations, who are trying to get to that place, right? We're talking to them about all their income streams and programming and trying to help them uplift to get to a place. But when we're working with larger organizations or, being contracted, right? We're always pushing wage. My partner is pushing wage so often now that I hear so many other people talking about wage. So it does work. It does work when you're thinking about how we're making sure we're taking care of people. I'm on the board of GPAC, Greater Pittsburgh's Arts Council. And we're also talking about those things, and advocacy is so big as far as making sure that we're supporting the artists as an artist support organization and those who are getting hired. We have to talk about what is happening with the rest of America too, right? We have to make sure that we are uplifting that pay to what everybody else is doing. Because the same things are happening all over the place, right? Everything is getting higher, interest rates, food, all types of stuff is raising. We can't have people with sustainable income or any income at all if we are not doing anything to match that. Again, it is creating more people who are ending up in survival mode, people who have to move out of their own place, live with family or friends. You know what I mean? People who have to consistently share transportation with families. It's starting to get difficult for people to have childcare. A lot of people are choosing either whether to stay home or to go and enjoy themselves or enjoy themselves as a family, right? Again, these are things that we shouldn't have to worry about, and making sure that people are able to enjoy. But, again, we are pushing wage so much to people and also talking with them so that they understand how to utilize this calculator to come up with these fees. And definitely it bases it off the highest making person in the organization. So it gives you a percentage based off of that, which should be happening at any organization or any business or anything. If somebody is making X amount of billions or millions of dollars, right? That means their staff should be able to get at least a small percentage of what that is and making sure that their business is being, is still open and still thriving. You see a lot of these places right now, they're thriving, but they're still firing and, rehiring people as temporary and firing them again because they can, because they're trying to, just save their funds. And it's just way better just to pay people to do the job right. Most people want to do that. Most people want to be able to, again, just go to work, live a regular, happy life. And so we should be making sure that others know and understand how to utilize different tools and or making sure, telling them that it's not going to hurt their business at the end of the day. It's not. It really is not like that. Us making sure that we pay all our contractors, the wages that they deserve or what they ask for, again, because some people don't even get asked, what they think they deserve, right? So, and when people ask us or, we talk to them, I ask them what their rates are. I ask them what they know. And even if their rates don't even sound like it should be, sometimes we tell them to raise that rate. So they make sure they're taking care of themselves. So, I think it's on us people to make sure that we're talking to our friends, our family members, other community members, sharing, all these tools and resources to make sure that, we get to the right place.
Thank you so much for that, Laura.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important that folks really educate themselves in their communities about what wages currently are and what they should be and what's livable and all those kinds of things. But I would also then say the next step is you need to, in order to change systemically what minimum wage is, we have to have legislation happen. And that doesn't happen, I think I said this earlier, unless we have people in the state house who are friendly to and understand the need of changing the minimum wage here in Pennsylvania. So, educate yourself first, get yourself really educated, know the tools, all of those things that Jay Thomas talked about, really important. The next thing is contact your state legislature, your county council people, all of your elected representatives, so that they fundamentally understand that this needs to change. And they are not going to do it unless they hear from a majority of their, or enough of their constituents that this is important. And so that work has to happen as well. It's not an either or, right? It's all of these things have to happen at the same time. And so, that is what we hope we can get people to do in the work. We're going to be trying to work on this year. So that was what I would tell people. And I know that that's uncomfortable. People don't like to pick up the phone and call people, but that's what they pay attention to at the end of the day. And, you know, and it's easy, and just share your stories and of your community. And they will listen if you are their constituent. We have to remember that you actually are their boss. It's not the other way around. So you elect them, they should be doing what you ask them to do. So that was what I would suggest to folks.
Thank you so much for that. And I see that Representative Rabb has dropped his bill in the chat. It is Pennsylvania House Bill 1135. You can go and read it. It's always important. You know, knowledge is power, and we always want people to be informed about the decisions that are out there. Knowledge is power, but so is time. And that means we are at time for today. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Diamond, Kendra, J. Thomas, Representative Rabb, Representative Kenyatta, Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis. I want to thank One Fair Wage, Keystone Progress Education Fund for joining us, and all of you for joining us today on a Tuesday. But before you go, one more thing. We have the website, the PA Living Wage website. Please go on to that website. You can get more information. You can sign up for future events, and you can join One Fair Wage. They have a goal to have 25 by 25. They want 25 living wage bills across the country by 2025, and Pennsylvania can be one of those. To get involved, to talk, you know, to your coworkers, your colleagues, your employers, your unions, your halls, your chambers of commerce, everyone, to get on board with having a living wage. So again, thank you all for joining us for this PA Living Wage Town Hall. Please go online to our website. That's palivingwageforall.org. Again, palivingwageforall.org. Sign up. You can get information about upcoming events, to learn more about, you know, the bills, what's a living wage, a tip wage, and the history of wages, see what other people are doing. So again, thank you all so much. Reminder, we're going to continue to uplift all of this throughout 2024, and we'll be letting you know who supports raising the wage for all workers and a living wage for all of us. Thank you so much for joining. And again, thank you, Representative Rabb, for your One Fair Wage bill. Always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your evening, y'all. Thank you so much again.